Hey, I said stop! Don't you walk away from me! The harsh voice cracked across the late afternoon air like a whip, turning every head at the Sunline Gas and Food off Highway 82. Elderly couples paused mid-step, truckers froze with their fuel pumps still in hand, and a young mother tightened her grip on her toddler's wrist. Pump 4 was suddenly the center of the world. Two state troopers had cornered a man next to a rusty blue pickup. He was thin, hunched slightly, jacket zipped tight despite the Arizona heat. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. Sweat darkened the back of his collar. His hands shook as he reached for his wallet. But the trooper barking orders didn't care. "I said don't make any sudden moves," Officer Doherty barked, hand already hovering far too close to his holster. The man froze. Every wrinkle on his face seemed carved from fear. I'm just getting my ID," he stammered, voice trembling. The second trooper, a younger one named Hale, stepped forward, eyes narrowed. "Lift your jacket." The man shook his head immediately. "Please, I can't do that. Not here." "Why not?" Doherty sneered. "You hiding something? Because you sure look like you're hiding something." A murmur rippled through the crowd. People whispered, a few pulled out phones, a couple of old-timers exchanged glances that said something's wrong, but no one dared interfere. It was the kind of moment older folks had seen too many times on the news. A scared man, a pair of officers amped up too fast, a crowd holding its breath, waiting for catastrophe. The man pressed his hand against his jacket zipper, protecting something underneath. "Please," he whispered, "let me explain." "No talking," Officer Hale snapped. "Just do what you're told." The man took a deep breath. I can't." Officer Doherty's patience snapped like dry twigs. He grabbed the man by the shoulder, yanked him forward, and spun him against the truck. The man winced in pain but didn't resist. He looked terrified of what would happen if he did. "Last warning," Doherty barked. "Lift your jacket." The man squeezed his eyes shut. And that was when a voice rose from behind the gas station snack aisle, shaky but firm. "Hey, leave him alone!" All heads turned. An older woman, mid-60s, white hair pulled into a bun, shopping bag still in her hand, marched forward with surprising speed. Her name was Alice Henderson, retired nurse, grandmother of 4, and not someone who tolerated cruelty where she saw it. She pointed straight at the officers. "He's not resisting. You're bullying him. That's enough." Officer Hale scowled. "Ma'am, step back." "I won't," Alice snapped. "He's clearly scared out of his mind. What's wrong with you boys?" Several other customers stepped closer, unsure but encouraged by her courage. Phones went up. Cameras came on. Someone whispered, "She's right. He doesn't even look dangerous." But the officer stayed locked in, adrenaline overcoming reason. The man, still pressed against the truck, spoke softly through clenched teeth. "I'm not dangerous, I swear. I'm trying to save something." Doherty grabbed a fistful of his jacket. "Save what?" The man's voice cracked. "A life." Alice's face softened. "A life? Whose life?" The man swallowed hard. Then, a tiny sound escaped from under his jacket. A sound so faint, so fragile, only those closest heard it at first. Whimper. Alice's eyes widened. "Oh, dear Lord." Hale stepped back a half step, suddenly unsure. What was that? Doherty yanked again. "Tell us what you're hiding." The man finally lifted his chin, eyes wet, breath shaking. "It's not a weapon," he whispered. "It's a baby." Every sound in the gas station stopped. A soda machine hissed in the background, ignored. A pickup truck's engine rumbled, forgotten. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Alice stepped closer, voice barely a whisper. "Baby? Human? Or—" Another whimper, louder this time, slipped from under the jacket. The man nodded weakly. She's only 3 days old. Hale blinked hard, stunned. Why is there a baby under your jacket? The man's entire body trembled. Because if anyone saw her, they'd take her away before I could get her to safety. Please, please don't hurt us. But Doherty didn't budge. No compassion, no pause. Only suspicion. What kind of man smuggles a newborn into a gas station? Step away from the vehicle now. The man's breath hitched. She'll freeze if I uncover her out here. Please, she's sick. I need formula and... You think I care? Doherty barked. Alice gasped, anger rising. Dear God, officer, he said the baby is sick. She pushed through the onlookers and stood beside the man, shielding him with her body. Enough, she said. He's not a threat. You are. Ma'am, step back, Hale warned, though his voice had lost its bite. No, Alice said firmly, folding her arms. You're not stripping a sick newborn in a parking lot. The man's voice shook harder now. She hasn't eaten in 12 hours. She's burning up. I'm trying to get her to someone who can help. Someone in the crowd whispered, Why not go to a hospital? The man closed his eyes in pain. I can't. Why? Alice asked gently. He hesitated, then whispered the words that made every hair on every neck stand upright. Because the people looking for her, the ones who want to take her back, they're not her parents. Alice swallowed hard. The crowd stiffened. Hale stepped closer. Sir, what exactly are you saying? I'm saying, the man whispered, eyes pleading, that baby isn't supposed to be in this country. And the people who brought her here, his voice broke, they're running something far darker than you think. Hale and Doherty exchanged a look, uncertainty creeping in for the first time. Alice steadied the man with a hand on his arm. What did they do to this child? She whispered. The man's lip trembled as the tiny newborn whimpered again. I can't say it out loud, he said. Not here. He looked around the gas station, the people watching, the officers ready to pounce, the cameras recording, as every second was a countdown. His voice dropped to a whisper. But if you want to know the truth, you need to get us somewhere safe. Alice inhaled sharply. The officers straightened. The crowd leaned in. The man finally unzipped his jacket, just enough for Alice and only Alice to see. She gasped so loudly the officers recoiled. My God, she whispered, hand over her mouth. What have they done to this child? And just like that, everyone realized this wasn't a police stop anymore. This was the beginning of something much, much darker.
For a moment, the world felt frozen. The heat radiating off the asphalt, the faint buzz of fluorescent lights above the gas pumps, the steady whir of the ceiling fans spinning inside the mini-mart. None of it mattered. All eyes were locked on Alice Henderson, her hand trembling, her breath unsteady, as she stared at the tiny newborn tucked beneath the stranger's jacket. She didn't describe what she saw. She didn't need to. Her expression said everything. Horror, heartbreak, rage. Officer Hale stepped closer, voice softer now. Ma'am, what is it? Alice lifted her eyes slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. She's hurt. Hurt how? Doherty demanded, agitation flaring again. Alice didn't answer immediately. Instead, she gently placed a hand on the man's shoulder, not out of suspicion, but humanity. What's her name? She asked. The man looked ready to collapse. Tears gathered in the corners of his tired eyes. I don't know. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Hale blinked hard. You don't know the baby's name? The man nodded miserably. She didn't have one. Not when I found her. Alice's heart twisted. Found her? Where? The man swallowed. For a moment, the world felt frozen. the heat radiating off the asphalt, the faint buzz of fluorescent lights above the gas pumps, the steady whir of the ceiling fans spinning inside the mini-mart. None of it mattered. All eyes were locked on Alice Henderson, her hand trembling, her breath unsteady, as she stared at the tiny newborn tucked beneath the stranger's jacket. She didn't describe what she saw. She didn't need to. Her expression said everything. Horror, heartbreak, rage. Officer Hale stepped closer, voice softer now. "Ma'am, what is it?" Alice lifted her eyes slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. "She's hurt." "Hurt how?" Doherty demanded, agitation flaring again. Alice didn't answer immediately. Instead, she gently placed a hand on the man's shoulder, not out of suspicion, but humanity. "What's her name?" she asked. The man looked ready to collapse. Tears gathered in the corners of his tired eyes. I don't know." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Hale blinked hard. "You don't know the baby's name?" The man nodded miserably. She didn't have one. Not when I found her." Alice's heart twisted. "Found her? Where?" The man swallowed a lump in his throat. "In a warehouse, outside Tucson." That did it. Even Doherty's aggression faltered for half a heartbeat. "A warehouse?" Hale repeated slowly. The man nodded again. "And she wasn't the only one." The silence that followed felt like a vacuum, sucking the air out of the station. Someone in the watching crowd whispered shakily, "Dear God." The man finally turned, pressing his back against the truck for support as he gently opened his jacket a little wider, this time for the officers to see. The baby was tiny, too tiny, her skin pale and blotched with faint marks, her wrists wrapped in medical tape. A thin scar, no larger than a fingernail, ran across her stomach. A breathing flutter escaped her lips, weak, uneven. Hale's jaw clenched. "How old is she?" 3 days, maybe 4, the man whispered. Alice stepped closer, maternal instincts overpowering everything else. "She's starving and dehydrated." The man nodded, guilt etched into every line of his face. "I've been trying to feed her with a syringe, but she can't keep it down. Her temperature keeps dropping. I didn't know where else to go." Doherty snapped back into command mode. "So you came to a gas station with a newborn? Why didn't you go to a hospital?" The man's reaction was immediate, almost panicked. No hospitals. They'll find her there." "Who?" asked Hale. The man looked around, at the officers, the crowd, the cameras, and lowered his voice. "People who buy children." A murmur rippled through the bystanders. Phones trembled in hands. Someone cursed under their breath. A woman covered her mouth, tears brimming. Alice squeezed his arm gently. "It's okay. You're safe here. Just tell us what happened." But the man didn't speak right away. He stared at the ground, chest heaving, like he was trying to decide if he could trust anyone or if telling the truth might get him killed. Finally, he whispered, "My name is Ian Walker. He hesitated. "I was a long-haul truck driver, freelance, in and out of state lines." Doherty crossed his arms. "Go on." "I was hired a week ago to deliver a sealed crate from a facility outside Nogales to a warehouse in Tucson. Nothing unusual. Happens all the time." Alice frowned. "Did you know what was inside?" Ian shook his head violently. "No, I swear. Thought it was electronics or medical gear." Hale stepped in, more patient. "Then what changed?" Ian's voice broke. "The crying." Doherty stiffened. "Crying?" Ian nodded, rubbing a shaking hand over his face. "I heard it, halfway through the drive. At first it was faint, like a kitten, but then it got louder, desperate." Alice closed her eyes, her heart shattering. "I pulled over," Ian continued, "opened the back of the trailer. The crate was shaking. I pried the top open." His face crumpled. "And there she was, wrapped in a blanket,
barely breathing. The crowd sucked in a breath. Ian continued, words tumbling out now, raw and frantic. I panicked. I didn't know what to do. I kept thinking, maybe she needs help, so I checked the warehouse I was supposed to deliver to. I parked outside, hid, watched. "What did you see?" Hale asked softly. Ian swallowed hard. Men, armed, no uniforms, moving crates in and out, same size as the one she was in. They weren't storing electronics. His voice shook harder. They were storing children. Alice gasped loudly enough for everyone to hear. Hale's face went white. Doherty's mouth opened, but no words came out. Ian clutched the baby closer to his chest. "I couldn't bring her to them. I couldn't." "So you ran," Alice whispered. Ian nodded. "I drove all night, stopped only to keep her warm, tried to call hotlines, but I didn't know who I could trust. What if someone in law enforcement was involved? I've heard things, seen things, transport routes with no names, payments under shell companies. It's bigger than me." Tears streamed down his face now. "She's just a baby. She didn't ask for any of this." Alice touched his arm gently, voice thick with emotion. "You did the right thing by protecting her." But Doherty snapped out of the moment, ego flaring. "That's enough story time. You're coming with us, Walker." Alice spun around. "Officer Doherty, have some compassion. You heard him. That baby needs medical attention. And we'll get it at the station, after we get him in cuffs." The crowd murmured in outrage. "He's not a criminal. He saved her. He needs help." But Doherty ignored them and stepped forward aggressively. Ian backed away instinctively, clutching the baby. "No, please, don't separate us. She needs warmth, please." Marking a line she rarely crossed, Alice shoved herself directly between Ian and Doherty. "You're not cuffing him," she said firmly. "Not while that baby is fighting for life." Hale raised a hesitant hand. "Doherty, maybe we should take a second, think this through." "It's protocol," Doherty barked. "He interfered with a delivery route. He stole property. He admitted it." "She isn't property," Alice snapped. The older officer blinked, taken aback by her force. "She's a child, a victim, and he's the only reason she's alive." Hale looked at Ian, to the baby, to the shaken faces of the bystanders. Finally, he exhaled. "I think we call this in differently," he said quietly. "This isn't a standard arrest." Doherty bristled. "You're letting your emotions—" "No," said Hale, cutting him off. "I'm listening to my instincts and to everyone here." He glanced at the crowd, then at Alice. "We need EMS and a child welfare specialist, not cuffs." The tension in the air thinned, but didn't disappear. Ian sagged in relief. Alice placed a hand on his back. "You're safe now." But Ian shook his head, terror creeping back into his voice. "No," he whispered. Everyone turned toward him. "They're coming." Hale stiffened. "Who?" Ian lifted trembling eyes toward the open road. "The people who want her back."
For several long seconds, nobody moved. Even the wind seemed to still, as if the desert itself was holding its breath. Officer Hale was the first to break the silence. "Ian, what do you mean they're coming?" Ian didn't answer right away. His eyes were locked on the distant stretch of highway beyond the dusty gas station sign, the shimmering heat waves bending the air above the asphalt. "I tracked them," he whispered, voice shaking. "They've been following me since Arizona. Black SUVs, no plates, same men I saw at the warehouse." Doherty scoffed loudly, though the unease in his eyes betrayed him. "Come on, you're paranoid." Ian shook his head fiercely. "They don't lose trails. I've seen them tail other drivers before. Anyone who got curious, anyone who asked questions. None of them ever made it to their next delivery." Alice's stomach twisted. "You think they tracked you here?" she asked. Ian swallowed. "I don't think. I know." Hale stepped closer. "How?" "Because I ditched them once already, cut through a dry riverbed, took back roads for an hour. But this morning," he paused, breathing shakily, "I spotted one again in my rear view. Same model, same tinted windows."
The baby whimpered softly, her tiny fingers curling into his shirt. As if on cue, a low rumble echoed in the distance. Everyone turned toward the highway. Doherty muttered a curse under his breath. A dark SUV was approaching, not speeding, not weaving, just watching, staying the exact speed to keep itself at a comfortable distance. Hale stepped forward, hand instinctively reaching toward his holster. The crowd scattered slightly, murmuring in fear. Alice's entire body tensed. She stepped closer to Ian, protective instincts firing. "Stay behind me," she whispered. Ian didn't argue. The SUV slowed near the intersection. It didn't turn in, didn't stop, just paused, long enough for every person at the gas station to feel its presence. The windows stayed up, no faces visible, no plates on the bumper. Then, without warning, it rolled away, disappearing beyond the bend in the road. But the ghost it left behind lingered, a cold, sinking dread. Hale exhaled shakily. "Everyone stay calm. We don't know that was related." Ian's voice trembled. "They're scouting the area. They're finding the safest angle to approach." Doherty, now visibly rattled, rubbed the back of his neck. "Well, dispatch is sending backup, but we're pretty far out. Closest unit is at least 15 minutes away." 15 minutes, Alice repeated, her voice cracking. "That baby might not even have 15 minutes. Ian tightened his grip on the tiny girl. "And we won't have 15 if those men come back armed." Hale shot Doherty a hard look. "We should have put out a bolo the moment he mentioned armed suspects." "And tell dispatch what? That some random truck driver claims there's a multi-state child trafficking ring following him? We need evidence first." Alice stepped forward, fury in her eyes. "Look at the baby. Look at her condition. Isn't that enough?" A tense silence fell again. Then Hale nodded slowly. "She's right. We need to treat this as credible." He lifted his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 7. We have a possible kidnapping victim, newborn female, signs of neglect and trauma. Request immediate EMS and highway patrol backup. Be advised, possible pursuit by armed suspects in an unmarked black SUV." The radio crackled. "Copy that, Unit 7. Backup en route." Alice let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. But Ian, he didn't relax, not even a little. His eyes were darting around the parking lot, the pumps, the dunes, the empty stretch of land behind the station. "They're not gonna wait," he whispered. "They'll move in before backup arrives." "Stop," said Alice softly. "You're safe here." "No," Ian shook his head. "You don't understand these people. They don't fail. They don't get embarrassed. If they lost a child on their watch," he swallowed hard, "they'll burn the world down to get her back." Another rumble rolled across the desert. This one closer. Not a car. Two. Hale and Doherty spun toward the highway, hands hovering near their weapons. "Everyone get inside the minimart, now," Hale ordered. The bystanders hurried toward the door, frightened and stumbling. Alice grabbed Ian's arm. "Come on." But Ian didn't move. He looked paralyzed, not with fear, but guilt. "It's my fault," he whispered. "I led them here." "Stop," Alice said harshly. "The only thing you did was save her. Do you hear me? You saved her life." Ian blinked rapidly, tears blurring his vision. The baby whimpered again, tiny lungs struggling to breathe. Alice softened. "We need to get her out of the heat, inside, now." Ian finally nodded, but before they could take a step, 3 more black SUVs appeared on the horizon. Not sneaking, not scouting, driving fast. Doherty swore loudly. "Oh, hell." Hale raised his weapon. "Inside! Go!" The crowd screamed and ran for shelter. Alice tugged Ian toward the door. They nearly made it. Nearly. But then, a bullet shattered one of the gas station lights overhead. The sound exploded across the parking lot like a thunderclap. Alice ducked, pulling Ian down with her. People screamed. Someone dropped their groceries. An R-car alarm blared. Hale shouted, "Shots fired! Dispatch, shots fired!" Doherty returned fire blindly, yelling for people to stay down. Alice's heart pounded in her ears as she shielded Ian and the baby with her own body. "They're trying to scare us back outside," he whispered, "so they can grab her." Alice gritted her teeth. Not happening. The door to the mini-mart swung open, and the owner, a thin older man with shaking hands, waved frantically. "Come on, hurry!" Hale covered them, firing controlled warning shots as Alice dragged Ian inside. The moment they crossed the threshold, the owner locked the door and pulled down the security shutters. Everyone inside huddled low behind shelves and counters. Hale and Doherty crouched near the window, breathing hard, guns drawn. Outside, the SUVs spread out, forming a half-circle around the station like wolves surrounding prey. Alice clutched Ian's arm. "What do they want to do? Storm the place?" "No," Ian heavily said. "They want to intimidate the officers, make them hand her over willingly. But if that doesn't work—" "What?" she whispered. Ian met her eyes. "They'll tear the whole building apart." Alice's knees weakened, but then she looked down at the newborn, the tiny chest struggling up and down, each breath a battle, and something inside her hardened. "They're not taking her." Ian nodded, trembling. "I know. Even if they walk through fire," Alice added, voice steady, "they're not taking her." He looked at her, exhaustion and fear swimming in his eyes. "You don't even know us," he whispered. "Why do you care this much?" Alice swallowed, her throat tight. "Because every child deserves someone who refuses to give up on them." Outside, more engines echoed across the desert, not approaching, waiting, like predators settling in for the long hunt. Hale's radio crackled again. "Unit 7, backup is 12 minutes out." 12 minutes? Hale whispered. "We may not have 12 minutes. Doherty looked over his shoulder. "What's the plan, Hale?" But Hale didn't answer, because there was no plan. Not yet. Not with a newborn dying in a stranger's arms. Not with armed men circling the station. Not with the clock ticking down. Alice glanced at Ian. Ian glanced at Hale. Hale glanced at the barricaded doors. No one said it, but everyone felt it. This wasn't a standoff anymore. This was a countdown.
The gas station mini-mart smelled of old coffee, floor cleaner, and fear. Pure, choking fear. Everyone inside stayed crouched behind counters or aisles, trying to stay quiet even as their breath quivered and their hearts hammered wildly. Outside, the black SUVs idled like beasts waiting to pounce. Their engines rumbled low and steady, vibrating through the floor. Occasionally, a dark figure moved between them, fast, purposeful, armed. The desert sun beat down mercilessly on the metal shutters. Inside, the air felt too thin. Alice held her breath as she watched Hale peek through the narrow slit between the shutter and the door frame. His jaw tightened. "They're organizing," he murmured. Doherty wiped sweat from his forehead. "You mean they're planning an assault?" "Yeah." The mini-mart owner, trembling so violently he had to grip a shelf for balance, whispered, my God, they're going to kill us all." Alice pressed a hand to Ian's back. He was hunched on the floor, the newborn bundled in his arms, her tiny body barely moving. "Is she still breathing?" Alice whispered. He nodded faintly. "Weak, but she's fighting." Alice brushed a fingertip across the baby's cheek. "Cold. Too cold." She swallowed hard. "We need to keep her warm," she said softly. "Shock can kill a newborn this young in minutes." Ian nodded, removing his jacket and wrapping it around the child. Alice pulled her own sweater off and added it to the small makeshift cocoon. The baby let out a faint, soft cry, barely audible, but alive. Alice felt tears prick her eyes. "Not here. Not now." Hale moved back from the window. "We need a plan." Doherty scoffed. "We have guns and thin walls. They have numbers, armor, and no hesitation to shoot civilians. What plan?" Hale shut his eyes for a second, steadying himself. "We hold them off until backup arrives." "Backup might not make it," Doherty snapped, "and we're surrounded. We're sitting ducks." Before Hale could respond, the baby whimpered louder, a sharp, weak sound that sliced through the silence. Every head in the mini-mart turned. Ian held her close, whispering, "Shh, shh, please, little one." Alice squeezed his arm.
And outside, as if responding to the sound, someone shouted, "We know you have her. Bring the child out now." Everyone froze. Alice's skin turned to ice. Ian clutched the baby so protectively she thought his arms might break. Hale stepped forward, voice firm. "No one move. They're trying to flush us out." Another voice rang out, deeper, colder. "You're outnumbered. You're outgunned. You have 60 seconds before we come in." Doherty whispered, "They're not bluffing." Hale lifted his radio, voice low. "Dispatch, suspects are preparing to breach. We need immediate tactical backup." A burst of static. Then, "Copy, units are on the way." "How far?" Hale demanded. 10 minutes. 10 minutes. It might as well be an hour. A crash sounded outside. Alice flinched. "What was that?" she whispered. Hale looked toward the back of the store. Rear door. They're testing weaknesses. The owner nearly collapsed. "They'll come in from both sides. Oh, God." Doherty drew his gun. "We need to block the back door." "Good idea," Hale said. "Alice, Ian, stay low. Don't move." Alice nodded. Ian nodded too, more slowly, like his mind was tugged in a dozen directions at once. Doherty and Hale hurried toward the back storage area. Alice waited only a second before whispering to Ian, "Are you okay?" His eyes were distant, haunted. "They're here because of me. If I hadn't stopped for gas—" "Stop." Alice grabbed his chin gently and forced him to look at her. "You did the right thing. You saved her. But now I've put everyone else in danger." "You didn't put us in danger. They did, and they don't get to win." He looked down at the baby, his voice breaking. "She was the only one who cried. That's why I grabbed her. The other children, they didn't cry. They just lay there." Alice's heart slammed against her ribs. "Other children?" Ian nodded slowly. "There were more, at least 6, maybe more. They didn't make a sound. I think they were sedated." And suddenly, the entire nightmare deepened. This wasn't just a single kidnapping. This was a pipeline. Before Alice could respond, the building shook violently. Something slammed against the side door. Hale shouted from the back, "They're trying to ram it open." Another crash. The baby startled, letting out a sharp cry. Ian held her close, murmuring soothing words. Alice's pulse hammered so loudly she could barely hear anything else. Hale sprinted back to the front. "Back door won't hold long." Doherty followed, face pale. "We need to get out of here." "Into the open?" Hale snapped. "They'll mow us down." "We stay here, they break in. We leave, we get shot. We're trapped either way." Another impact hit the back of the building. The metal door groaned, bending inward. The owner nearly collapsed. "Please don't let them kill me." Alice stepped in front of Ian and the baby instinctively. Hale saw it. "You can't stand there," Hale said harshly. "You're not armed." "I'm not letting them near this child," Alice said. "She needs protection," Ian whispered. "But I can't move. My legs feel numb." "They're not getting to her," Alice repeated through clenched teeth. Outside, someone shouted again. 10 seconds. Hale raised his gun. Doherty raised his. Alice's breath caught in her throat. The back door rattled violently, then gave a loud metallic screech. Ian gasped. "They're in." But before he could finish, Hale shouted, "They're coming through the back. Move! Move!" The door burst inward. 2 masked men flooded into the storage area, guns raised. "Oh, God." Alice's mind screamed, "Run," but her body refused. The baby cried louder now, a desperate, terrified wail that filled the entire mini-mart. The masked men sprinted forward. Hale fired. A shelf exploded in sparks. Doherty took cover behind the counter, firing back. Alice grabbed Ian's arm. "We have to get to the freezer room. Now." Ian held the baby tightly and nodded. They ran. Bullets pinged off metal signs behind them. Glass shattered across the floor. Hale yelled, "Keep moving." Alice shoved open the metal door to the walk-in freezer and pulled Ian inside. The cold blasted her skin like knives. She slammed the latch shut, just as footsteps thundered past the hallway outside. Ian pressed his back against the wall, gasping for breath. The baby whimpered softly, her cries muffled in his jacket. "I shouldn't be hiding," he whispered. "I should fight." "You did fight," Alice insisted. "You saved her." He shook his head. "It's not enough." "It is," she insisted. "Right now, this is enough." Their breaths created puffs of fog in the freezing air. Outside, gunfire erupted. Shouts, crashes, the groan of metal being torn apart. Alice held her hands over her mouth to stifle her breathing. The baby cried again. Ian pressed her close, rocking gently, but she was too weak, too distressed. And then, a shadow darkened the slit under the freezer door. A voice spoke, calm, low, amused. "I know you're in there." Alice's heart stopped. "Open the door," the voice continued, "and I'll let you live." Ian froze, holding the newborn so tightly her tiny fist pressed against his chest. Alice shook her head slowly. He shook his, too. The man outside chuckled lightly. "Suit yourself." Metal scraped. A boot slid into view. Then, he began to pry the door open. Alice grabbed Ian's arm, whispering, "Whatever happens, don't let them take her." Ian nodded, trembling but resolute. Hale's distant shouting grew louder. Doherty yelled something ineligible. Shattering glass, more footsteps, chaos everywhere. And in the freezing dark of that tiny room, as the door slowly, steadily, dangerously began to move, Alice tightened her fists. Ian held his breath. The baby cried. And the monster outside kept prying the door open, inch by horrifying inch.
The freezer door moaned under the pressure. Metal bent inward where the crowbar dug in, inch by inch. The cold air stung Alice's skin, but fear burned hotter. Ian pressed the baby against his chest, whispering soft, broken words, anything to keep her calm, but she sensed the danger and let out a thin, trembling cry. Outside, the man gave a low chuckle. "There she is," he murmured, voice dripping with satisfaction. "The little one's alive. Hand her over and this ends peacefully." Alice dug her nails into her palms. "It won't end peacefully," she whispered. "They'll kill us." Ian nodded, jaw locking. "I know." The metal hinges groaned violently as the door pulled another inch open. A sliver of the man's dark mask appeared through the widening gap. Alice grabbed the nearest object she could find, a frozen box of meat. Ridiculous as a weapon, but it was all she had. Ian whispered sharply, "Alice, no!" But she stepped forward anyway. Outside, gunfire cracked through the minimart again. Hale's voice shouted orders. Doherty yelled something back. The masked men were sweeping the aisles, closing in. The freezer door screeched louder. A hand forced its way inside. Gloved, relentless. Alice raised the frozen box. The man laughed. "Really? You think?" She slammed the box on his hand. A sickening crunch echoed. "Ah!" He yanked his hand back, cursing. "Stupid, little—" Alice didn't hesitate. She body-slammed her weight against the door, forcing it shut. The latch clicked. The man outside snarled. "You're only delaying it." Alice leaned her forehead against the icy metal, gasping for breath. Ian stared at her, stunned. "You could have gotten yourself killed." "So could you," Alice said softly, "but we're still here." His eyes softened, just for a heartbeat, before another violent crash shook the store. Ian flinched. "What if Hale and Doherty can't hold him?" "We don't wait for them," Alice whispered. "We make our own escape." Ian stared at her. "How?" She scanned the small freezer room. Back wall, metal, shelving, vents, then— "Yes!" She pointed to a small service hatch near the floor, barely visible behind stacked crates. "A crawl duct," Alice said. "It probably connects to the back loading area." "It's tiny," Ian said. "I know," she whispered, "but that's why it's perfect. They can't follow us through it." Ian looked down at the newborn in his arms. "I can try, for her." Alice knelt and moved the crates, her fingers numb from cold. She tugged on the metal panel. It wouldn't budge. Ian crouched beside her. "Move, I'll do it." He handed the baby carefully to Alice. The moment the baby touched her chest, the little one whimpered but nestled closer, seeking warmth. Ian gripped the hatch, jaw clenching. Metal screeched. The bolts tore loose. The hatch popped open, revealing a narrow tunnel coated with dust and cobwebs. Alice inhaled sharply. "Okay, we go now." But before they could move, the freezer door rang with a roar of rage. Boom! The man outside wasn't trying to pry anymore. He was slamming his full weight into it. Alice nearly dropped the baby. Ian grabbed her arm. "Go!"
Alice slid on her stomach, cradling the newborn, inching into the duct. The metal scraped her elbows, her knees. She felt the baby's tiny breath flutter against her collarbone. Behind her, Ian followed. The duct was narrow, claustrophobic. Every inch forward felt suffocating. And then, crash! The freezer door burst inward. A scream tore from Alice's throat, but she didn't stop crawling. Metal boots thundered into the freezer room. Ian whispered hoarsely, "Alice, faster!" She dragged herself forward, pushing through dust and stale air. The baby whimpered against her chest, but stayed quiet enough to not give them away. A flashlight being swept into the duct behind them. There they are! Gunshots exploded against the metal walls. Alice screamed silently, curling her body around the baby. Ian shouted, "Keep moving!" She crawled faster, rocks scraping her palms, fear clawing through her ribs. Behind them, a voice growled, "Shoot her legs!" Bullets ricocheted again. Ian surged forward, shielding Alice's feet with his body. He groaned in pain as metal shrapnel grazed him, but he kept pushing. Alice finally reached the end of the duct, a grate leading to the back storage lot. She rammed her shoulder into it. It didn't move. She tried again. Nothing. Ian's voice cracked behind her. "Alice, now!" She lifted her elbow and rammed it into the grate with everything she had. Crack! The bolt snapped. The grate fell outward. Sunlight blasted her eyes. Fresh air. Freedom. Alice slid out, hitting the concrete hard, but shielding the baby with her body. Ian crawled out after her. Behind them, the man tried to follow, but his shoulders jammed in the duct. He cursed violently. Alice didn't wait. She grabbed Ian's hand. "Run!" They sprinted through the fenced loading lot, weaving between crates and dumpsters. The ground trembled with approaching footsteps from inside the store. Gunfire cracked above them as bullets hit the walls. The baby cried louder now, hungry, freezing, terrified. Ian yelled, "The back gate! Go!" Alice saw it, a metal maintenance fence with a rusted padlock. Ian grabbed a crowbar from a crate left behind by workers. He slammed it against the lock. Clang! Nothing. Again. Clang! Behind them, men spilled out of the building, guns raised. Alice screamed, "Ian, hurry!" He slammed the lock one more time. Snap! The gate swung open. Alice pushed Ian through. He turned, took the baby from her to lighten her climb. She squeezed through the gap, and the moment she stepped outside the gate, a bullet struck the metal beside her cheek. She gasped, stumbling. Ian grabbed her, pulling her into the desert brush behind a building. They ran. They didn't know where. They didn't know how far. They didn't know if they'd survive the next minute, but they ran. The baby cried. Their lungs burned. The men shouted behind them, climbing the fence. Alice's vision blurred with sweat and fear. Ian whispered through his panting, "We get to the highway, flag a car, anything, just keep going." But the desert stretched endless, and behind them, engines roared to life, multiple engines. They were being followed. Alice clutched Ian's arm. He clutched the baby, and the chase truly began.
The desert wind shredded their breath as Alice, Ian, and the newborn stumbled down the dry wash that carved through the sand. The roar of engines behind them grew louder, closer, more coordinated. Alice risked a glance back. 2 black pickup trucks barreled over the ridge, kicking dust skyward. The masked men leaned out of the beds, rifles gleaming in the sun. "They're gaining!" she shouted. Ian didn't look, didn't slow. He just clutched the baby tighter, his arms trembling with exhaustion. "We keep moving." Alice tasted fear on her lips, metallic, acidic. "We need cover." "There!" Ian pointed to a cluster of jagged rocks piled like a broken spine across the hillside. They slid into the natural crevice, scrambling over the sharp, sun-cooked stones just as bullets chewed into the sand behind them. Rocks exploded into dust. A shard cut Alice's cheek, but she barely felt it. Ian shielded the baby with his entire body, tucking her beneath his chest as they ducked low. The truck skidded to a halt at the base of the hill. Footsteps thundered. One voice barked, "Search the whole ridge." Another snarled, "They couldn't have gotten far." Alice whispered, "Ian, they're not stopping. This is bigger than us." He swallowed hard, eyes burning with a truth he hadn't spoken yet. "It's much bigger."
he murmured, "and they know exactly who I am." Before she could respond, a low rumble filled the sky. Then a second rumble, and a third. Alice tilted her head upward. 3 news helicopters chopped through the air, circling overhead like vultures discovering fresh meat. Bright lights snapped on, camera lenses pointed directly at them. The gunmen cursed. One shouted, "Damn it, media!" Another snarled, fall back now!" In moments, the trucks peeled away in a spray of dust, disappearing across the desert route they had come from. The sudden quiet made Alice's ears ring. Ian exhaled shakily. "They don't want to be filmed." Alice pressed her forehead to the stone. "We're not safe. This just changed everything." Above them, helicopter reporters buzzed like mechanical insects. A booming voice echoed through a loudspeaker. "To the individuals on the ridge, authorities have been notified. Stay where you are. Help is coming." But help wasn't what Ian wanted, and not what those masked men feared. No, the danger of being seen changed the battlefield entirely, because now the world knew. Minutes later, a rapidly spreading wildfire of public outcry. News channels broke into programming across the country. Aerial footage streamed of a terrified pair scrambling across a desert ridge with a newborn, gunmen fleeing in trucks, the burned mini-marts still smoking, Officer Hale and Officer Doherty recovering behind their cruisers. Across America, particularly older viewers, phones rang, living rooms tensed, and outrage exploded. Who were those gunmen? Where was law enforcement backup? Why were armed men chasing a baby? The footage sparked national panic in minutes. Cable hosts on every channel seized it. One said, "This is a brazen, coordinated attack on American soil." Another countered, "Someone wanted this baby for a reason, and the parents are clearly running from more than danger." Speculation became wildfire. Senior citizens watched from recliners, breakfast tables, hospital beds, leaning forward, pulse quickening, every instinct screaming that something sinister had just been exposed. Meanwhile, back on the ridge, Alice and Ian watched the helicopters circle like guardian angels with cameras. Alice's voice trembled. "If the media found us, the police can too. We should stay put." Ian shook his head, not sharply, but with the heaviness of a man carrying a truth too large to say aloud. "No, they'll come, but so will the others." "The others?" Alice whispered. Ian looked at the sleeping baby. His jaw tightened. "They're not criminals," he said quietly. "They're part of something organized, something federal, something that won't stop." Alice felt the earth tilt beneath her. "Federal? Ian, what are you not telling me?" He didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, he peered over the ridge. Dust plumes rose from multiple directions. Police cruisers, sheriff trucks, ambulances, Homeland Security SUVs. Dozens, maybe more, speeding toward the ridge. Alice exhaled. "They found us." "They think they did," Ian murmured. She turned. "What does that mean?" He didn't get to answer. A helicopter dropped lower, with markings she didn't recognize, and over the loudspeaker, a chillingly controlled voice spoke. "Ian Mercer, you are hereby ordered to surrender the infant immediately." Alice froze. "What did they just say?" Ian closed his eyes. "They know who I am, which means it's already too late." But the voice wasn't done. "We are authorized to use force if you do not comply." Alice reeled backward, breath punched from her chest. She grabbed Ian's arm. "Ian, what does this mean? Why do they want the baby?" Ian looked at her, anguish written across his face. "I wasn't supposed to survive the wreck, and she," he motioned to the baby, "wasn't supposed to survive anything." Alice felt every hair on her body rise. "What? Who?" But before she could finish, another voice cut through the chaos. Officer Hale yelling into a megaphone from a distant cruiser. "Ian, Alice, do not move. These aren't our people. Don't listen to them." That was enough to cause panic in every direction. The HS SUV doors flung open. Agents drew weapons. Police officers yelled. News crews screamed. The helicopters jerked erratically, trying to reposition. The masked men's trucks reappeared on the horizon, barreling straight toward the media barricade. Alice covered the baby's ears. Chaos erupted. Gunshots cracked again. People dove for cover. News reporters flattened against their helicopter floors. Officers took defensive stances. Alice's breath came sharp and fast. "We have to get out of here." Ian nodded desperately. "They can't shoot with the cameras on us, but once they maneuver the choppers away, they'll take her," Alice finished. They crouched low and started scrambling up the far side of the ridge. Above them, another helicopter banked sideways, casting them in its spotlight. A reporter shouted into a live microphone, "They're trying to escape. Why won't anyone protect them? They have a newborn with them." The helicopters moved nearer, one drifting dangerously close to the ground, not by accident, trying to force them to stop. As it descended, the wind from the rotor whipped sand into their eyes, nearly knocking Alice backward. The baby began to cry. Ian yelled, "Keep beside me. Don't let them separate us." Alice fought the wind, gripping his shirt, the baby squirming against her chest. The helicopter touched almost low enough to block their path. Agents surged up the hill from the opposite side. Police ran toward them as well. Gunmen raced in from the desert. Everyone was converging on one point. The three of them. The newborn. Alice looked around, breath breaking into panic. "There's nowhere left. Ian, they're closing in." Ian stared at the horizon, eyes locking on something distant. A service road. Dusty, barely used, but something was coming down it, an older model RV chugging along at a slow, oblivious pace. The driver probably had no idea they were stumbling into a war zone. Alice grabbed Ian's arm. "We can't reach it. They'll gun us down." Ian shook his head. "No. Look." She followed his gaze. The media helicopters were repositioning again, trying to get a clean shot. All eyes were on them. All cameras pointed in their direction. "They won't fire with that many lenses on us," Ian said, "but we move now." They bolted. Agents shouted. Gunmen screamed. Officers yelled for ceasefire. The ridge exploded with noise, but the news cameras held steady. Millions of people watched the chaos live, hearts pumping, shouting at their screens for police to help them, for someone, anyone, to step between this family and whatever was hunting them. Alice stumbled down the slope toward the service road. Ian sprinted ahead, waving his free arm. The RV slowed, confused, the driver leaning forward in horror. Alice screamed, "Please, please stop!" The RV braked. Ian reached the door, gripping the handle, but before he could climb in, a single shot echoed. Not at them, at the sky. A warning. Then a voice bellowed from the hill. "The baby is not yours to save." Alice turned, face draining of color, because the voice wasn't from the agents, it wasn't from the masked men, it came from a man she'd never seen before, standing alone on the ridge, wearing an immaculate suit, calm as a ghost amid the chaos. He pointed directly at her, at the baby, and he smiled.
The world seemed to stop moving. The helicopters froze in midair, their thundering blades suddenly feeling like distant echoes. Reporters stopped shouting. Officers stopped charging. Even the masked men paused on the ridge behind their trucks. All eyes locked on the stranger. He stood tall, unmoving, almost serene, like someone who walked into chaos expecting it. His charcoal suit didn't belong in the desert heat, and yet he wore it like armor. His shoes were spotless, not a grain of dust on them. His dark hair combed neatly back, his hands relaxed at his sides. But it was his smile, small, controlled, chillingly certain, that made Alice's blood ice cold. Ian grabbed her wrist instinctively. "Don't look at him," he whispered. But Alice couldn't turn away. Something in that man's face pulled at her, like a recognition she shouldn't have had, like a memory that wasn't hers was calling out. The man lifted a hand, not in threat, not in greeting, but in quiet command. and the agents who had been screaming orders seconds before immediately fell silent. Even the masked gunmen seemed to shift. Though they hadn't come for him, they recognized him too. He had authority, real authority, the kind not written on paper, the kind feared. He took a few elegant steps down the ridge. "Alice," he called calmly. Her heart stopped. He knew her name, but she didn't know him. Her voice cracked. Who are you?" Before the man could answer, a police voice shouted from behind them. Officer Hale, breathless, desperate. "Alice, don't let him near the baby. He's not what he looks like." The suited man raised an eyebrow, as though Hale were a barking dog interrupting a quiet dinner. Ian snapped. "Stay back, I'm warning you." The man smiled broader this time. "Ian Mercer," he said softly. "I knew you'd try to run. It's admirable, really. Misguided, but admirable." Alice felt Ian's grip tighten painfully. The man knew him deeply. Her voice turned to a whisper. "Ian, who is that?" Ian's throat bobbed hard. "Alice, he's the reason I left my old job." The man chuckled warmly, like Ian had just told a charming joke. "No, my boy, I'm the reason you're still alive." Alice felt sick. "What do you want from us? Why are you after the baby?" The suited man descended another step, shoes clicking on stone, his face still maddeningly calm. "I've been after the baby," he repeated, sounding wounded. "Oh, Alice, no. I'm trying to protect her." Alice's stomach twisted. It was a lie. She didn't know how she knew it, but she felt it, deep, primal, certain. "She's not yours to protect," she shouted back. The man tilted his head. "That," he said, "is precisely where you're wrong." The wind whipped sand across the ridge. A helicopter floated lower, catching the suited man in perfect frame. Millions of viewers watched him now, waiting, wondering, judging. The suited man's smile faded, and the mask dropped. The truth Ian never wanted to speak. "Ian," Alice whispered, "tell me now, who is he?" Ian swallowed, eyes glossy with dread. "His name is Victor Harlan, director of a federal division so classified most government officials don't even know it exists." Alice's stomach clenched. Victor Harlan. Even the name felt cold. Ian continued, voice trembling. "He doesn't enforce laws. He decides them." Victor spread his arms theatrically. "Oh, Ian, you make me sound so villainous." Alice shook her head, her mind spinning. "What does a man like him want with a newborn? What makes her so important?" Victor's eyes landed on the child. His expression softened, genuine warmth flickering across his usually blank features. "It's not what she is, it's who she will become." Alice felt her breath seize. What does that mean?" Victor stepped down another few stones, hands still calmly at his sides. "Ian knows why," he said. "He read the file. He saw the predictions. He saw what she'll grow into, and he ran because he believed he could change it." He looked at Ian with pity. "You can't." Alice felt dizzy. She clutched the baby tighter, instinct burning through her. "She's just a child. You don't know anything about her future." Victor smiled again, soft, cruel, certain. "Oh, I know her future better than you know your past." Alice's chest tightened. She shook her head violently. "You're insane." Victor's eyes hardened. "Ian," he said sharply, ignoring Alice now, "bring me the child." Ian stepped in front of Alice so fast she gasped. "No." Victor examined him for a long moment. 5 years we worked together. 5 years, and this is how you repay me? By running into the desert with the most important infant in this hemisphere?" Alice whispered, horrified. "Ian, what was your job?" Ian's voice broke. "I analyzed behavioral projection models for classified cases, future threat assessments." Victor nodded approvingly. "And this baby," he added, "is a Category 1 anomaly." The words sliced through Alice like a blade. A what? She's a baby. She hasn't even lived a day. Victor raised a finger, as if lecturing a classroom. That's the fascinating part. Some individuals demonstrate early markers, neurological, genetic, psychological, patterns that in rare cases predict extraordinary outcomes. Alice stepped back a little. What outcomes? Victor's gaze locked on hers. All possibilities, including catastrophic ones. Alice felt her knees weaken. She isn't dangerous. Victor shrugged casually. Maybe, maybe not, but I can't take that chance. On the hillside behind him, agents fanned out again. Police tried to push forward, but the federal men blocked them. The news cameras zoomed in. The entire world listened as Victor spoke his next words. That infant will one day change the balance of power in this country, possibly the world. A stunned silence rippled across the desert. Even the reporters, mid-broadcast, gasped. Alice's mouth fell open. Ian stepped closer to her, voice shaking. I didn't know the baby would survive the crash. Victor told us all, that none of this would happen if the transport was destroyed. Alice stared at him. You knew about the baby before the gas station? Ian's face crumpled. I didn't know you'd be there. I didn't know she would survive. I didn't know I'd care. Victor sighed dramatically. And now look where we are. He extended his hand toward the child. Give her to me, Ian, and this ends peacefully. Alice felt the world crashing inward. The helicopters, the police, the masked men, the agents, the desert sun burning down. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. Ian shook his head slowly. No, he whispered. Not now. Not after everything. Victor's jaw flexed. A shame, he murmured. I always hoped you'd choose wisely. He snapped his fingers. An agent raised a rifle. Alice screamed. Ian grabbed her arm. Run! They sprinted toward the RV, the baby wailing, sand slipping beneath their feet. But Victor's voice thundered behind them, furious, venomous. You can't hide her, Ian. Not from me. Not from the future.
Gunfire cracked across the desert. Alice ducked instinctively, screaming as sand exploded beside her. Ian grabbed her waist, practically dragging her toward the RV. Her legs were shaking so badly she barely felt the ground beneath her feet. The baby cried against her shoulder, tiny body trembling, wails sharp enough to pierce the chaos around them. Keep running, Ian shouted, voice hoarse, filled with a desperation Alice had never heard from him. She didn't look back, didn't dare. The image of Victor's cold smile still burned behind her eyes. They lurched the last few feet toward the RV, rusted metal, cracked windows, useless engine and all, and Ian shoved Alice through the door as another shot whistled past. Alice landed hard on her knees. Ian slammed the door shut behind them, locking it just as bullets tore through the side paneling, pinging like metal screams. Alice clutched the baby close, heart roaring wildly. Ian, they're going to kill us. He pressed his forehead against the shaking door, breath ragged. No, he whispered. Victor won't kill the baby. Not yet. Not while he still wants her alive. Alice stared at him, tears streaking down her face, even as she rocked the child. What about us? She choked. What about us? Ian didn't answer, because they both knew the truth. Victor didn't need them alive. Ian reached under the small table bolted to the RV's floor, pulling out a hidden metal toolbox. Alice blinked through tears. You hid that earlier, she realized. Ian nodded. I knew this was coming. Another round of bullets shredded the far wall. Light poured in through fresh holes. Alice let out a strangled cry. Tell me there's something in that box that can help us, she pleaded. He snapped it open. Inside was an old satellite phone, a folded map, and a flash drive taped to the bottom. Alice stared at it. A flash drive. That was it? We're being hunted by men with guns and helicopters, and you brought a USB stick? Ian grabbed it and shoved it into his pocket. That drive contains everything Victor's afraid of.
the real file, the truth about what he wants the baby for. Alice's breath caught. What truth? Ian turned toward her, eyes dark, terrified, and dead serious. She isn't just a prediction. She's proof. Alice's voice cracked. Proof of what? Ian hesitated. And in that hesitation, the door burst inward. It didn't crash open. It didn't slam. It simply opened, quietly, deliberately, like someone letting themselves into their own home. Victor Harlan stepped inside. His suit, immaculate, his expression, calm, his hands clasped behind his back like a professor entering a classroom. Alice's heart nearly stopped. Ian leapt in front of her and the baby. Victor sighed. Ian, you're bleeding tension everywhere. Relax. If I wanted you dead, I wouldn't have given you a chance to run. Alice wanted to scream, to fight, to throw something at him, but she couldn't move, not with Victor's eyes now fixed directly on the baby. He stepped closer, and Ian reached for the handgun he'd hidden behind the RV's small sink. But Victor didn't flinch. He simply tilted his head. You won't shoot me, he said calmly. You've never had the stomach for it. Ian's hand shook violently. Alice could see his fear. Victor looked at Alice instead. Alice, his voice suddenly gentle, you've been extraordinarily brave, but bravery without information is just panic in a prettier disguise. Alice clutched the child tighter, glaring. You don't get to talk to me, not after what you've done. Victor nodded slowly. I understand your anger. Truly, I do. But I need you to hear me now. He pointed at the baby, delicately, almost reverently. That child, she carries something inside her that makes her the most consequential newborn in decades. Alice's entire body went cold. What? She whispered. Victor's jaw tightened with something resembling awe. She isn't a threat. She's an opportunity. Ian smacked on the floor. Don't listen to him, Alice. He wants to control her. He wants to raise her like a lab experiment. Use her. Victor's gaze snapped at Ian with chilling sharpness. I don't want to use her. I want to protect her from people far worse than me. Alice shook her head. You're lying. Victor leaned closer, his voice low. No, Alice, not this time. Do you think those armed men behind me belong to my team? A terrible stillness filled the RV. Alice blinked. What? Victor clasped his hands behind his back again. The masked men you saw today are not my agents. They work for someone else, someone who wants the child for reasons that even me make me uneasy. The floor seemed to tilt under her feet. You're saying there are others after her? Victor nodded once. And if I don't take her today, they will. A thunderous blast shook the RV. Gunfire, heavy, chaotic, erupted outside, people shouting, engines revving. Alice screamed, instinctively crouching over the baby. Victor stepped toward the window and parted the curtain slightly. Then he sighed. They're early. Who's early? Victor turned, his face for the first time not composed, but tense. The ones who don't want her alive. Alice felt the blood drain from her face. Another explosion rocked the ground? Dust poured in through cracks in the RV's battered frame. The baby cried louder, terrified. Victor stepped back from the window, his face grim. We don't have time. Ian raised his gun. You're not taking her. Victor didn't even look fazed. You don't have a choice. He reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. He tossed it at Ian's feet. Ian stared at it. What is that? Victor's voice softened almost imperceptibly. Proof. Ian slowly crouched, keeping the gun raised with one hand. He pulled open the pouch. Inside were pictures, tiny medical diagrams, scanned reports, a lock of newborn hair, and a single document stamped with the highest level clearance in the federal system. Alice's vision blurred. What is all this? Victor's voice became almost tender. It is evidence, Alice, that this child is not biologically yours. Alice's breath shattered. No, that's not true. I I fed her, held her, kept her warm. You saved her life, and now I need you to help save her future." Alice's knees buckled. She nearly dropped. Ian caught her shoulder. Victor continued, "She was never meant to be on that transport. The crash was no accident. Someone tried to eliminate her before she ever saw daylight." Alice sobbed. "She's just a baby." Victor shook his head, for the first time showing a flicker of fear. "No, Alice, she is the key to a discovery that could change global power forever." Gunfire rattled the outside again. Someone shouted. The RV shook violently. Victor extended his arms. "Give her to me, Alice, please, before they reach us." Alice felt the world collapsing, her mind spinning, her heart breaking. Outside, the attackers grew closer, shouting, engines revving, boots pounding the desert floor. Ian whispered fiercely, "Alice, we can run. We can still run." Victor whispered, "Alice, if you run, she dies." Tears streamed down her face. She looked at the baby in her arms, tiny, innocent, warm, her whole body shaking. And then, a shadow moved past the window, a gun cocked outside the door, another explosion rattled the ground. Alice had 1 second to decide, 1 second to choose who she believed. Her voice trembled violently as she lifted her head, and she spoke. "I'm not giving her to either of you." Victor froze. Ian went pale. Alice shoved the flash drive from Ian's pocket and shoved it into her bra. Then she did the unthinkable. She kicked open the back hatch of the RV and ran straight into the gunfire.